I don't know if you all got the email from Roshi with my little quote from Shengyan, or if you have it handy, but I'm going to read it. But before I read it, I'm going to read something else. So this is from the transmission of the light, the record of transmitting the light, as they translate it, which is the record of the Soto masters' lineage, awakenings, and how they traced their awakening from patriarch to patriarch. And there's a Dogen section here. And it's about Dogen's teacher, Ru Jing, his Chinese Caodong silent illumination teacher. So Dogen also studied Rinzai, but this was his, then he went to study with the Caodong school, and he studied specifically with Ru Jing and spent a long time with him. And the acknowledgement of his awakening by Ru Jing is very interesting, and to me has some bearing on just sitting. I had it marked and now I lost it, so I'm going to find it again, I hope. Otherwise I'll do it off my head. Basically Dogen heard Ru Jing talking about giving a talk on the practice of silent illumination, which Ru Jing referred to as just sitting. So he's kind of the one that started translating silent illumination sitting into just sitting. That was his take on silent illumination. And he said that the practice of Zazen is the dropping away or the dropping off of body and mind. And you may have heard that expression before from Dogen. And Dogen talked about the dropping off of body and mind as enlightenment, as illumination or awakening. So he said the practice of Zazen was the dropping off of body and mind. And when he heard that, Dogen had a great awakening. And he said something really interesting to Ru Jing. He said, Ru Jing acknowledged him and said, basically acknowledged his awakening. And Dogen said, this is just a temporary accomplishment to be able to drop off body and mind. Why would you acknowledge me for something like that? It's just temporary. So Dogen said, Ru Jing said something like, nevertheless, you've dropped off body and mind. I'm acknowledging you because you've dropped off body and mind. And Dogen bowed. He understood that and accepted it and bowed. And when he bowed, Ru Jing said to him, and this is the good part, he said, you've now dropped off dropping off. So that's kind of a wonderful take on the practice of Zazen as seen through silent illumination in the practice of just sitting. And it sheds some insight as to what is meant by just sitting. Dropping off of body and mind, experiencing whatever version of insight or awakening we may have, whether it's fleeting or not, or deeper, and we all have whatever experiences we have, is important and significant and wonderful. And our practice from day to day is important and significant and wonderful. But to be able to let go of the idea of having an awakening experience and to just acknowledge one's own presence one's own inherent awakening without labeling it and without separating from it, is another type of understanding. It's another type of understanding. And I think it leads to Dogen's insistence that we're not sitting in order to attain something. Doesn't mean that you don't want to be fully awake, but rather than sitting to attain something, we sit in acknowledgement of the illuminated presence that's already there. And we may experience that more or experience that less, but we're not separating from our sitting. We're not separating in our sitting from being present and being somewhere else and getting somewhere else, getting something else. Otherwise, we tend to promote or sit in separation rather than to sit in unity or unification of ourselves. So I love that quote. I love that story, the dropping off of dropping off. And I think that, Ru Jing put it a lot more simply and better in that sense than I can put it in explaining it, but I think it's worth the explanation. So now I'm going to read another quote, and it's a very different approach to silent illumination, just sitting, from Master Shengyan. And Shengyan is very practical in the way that he approaches just sitting. It has neither the absolute simplicity of being just sitting, to coin a phrase. In other words, the bare physical reality of being a body that sits. But it also doesn't go to the other side, where Dogen sometimes goes poetically and turn it into a mystical endeavor. It's sort of right down the center. So I'm going to read the whole quote, which will take a few minutes, and then we'll finally do a little sitting before we talk more. So Shengyan in this quote just jumps right in. I picked it from the middle of his the record of his 9-day silent illumination retreat. And this section is titled Entering Practice Through Breath Awareness, and then it goes on to entering practice without worrying about breath awareness. If you are familiar with the breath following method, you may use it as an entry into just sitting, but do not count the breaths. And I may comment a little bit along the way. Why not count the breaths? Because we're not focusing on concentration and trying to make sure that we count every breath. We're just using the breath as a method of being present. Just maintain full awareness of your breathing in and out. As your mind settles, you can effortlessly shift from following the breath to being aware of just sitting there. So the goal, if you're using the breath, is to use it as like a mode of transportation to carry you to just being aware of sitting. Breath awareness simply becomes one aspect of your whole body sensation, and you can begin to practice just sitting. So just sitting involves the whole body sensation. Make sure that your mental attitude is bright and open. Place your awareness on your breath going in and out, until the mind is quiet, settled, and clear. This is just using the breath as a medium for becoming aware of the whole body sitting there. As you become less occupied with the breath, you'll become more aware of the whole body sensation. So there's a really interesting focus here in Shengyan's approach to just sitting on direct embodiment, being aware of the whole body, being present, the whole body being present, the whole body being here. Then he says, if you can begin right away with just sitting, then by all means do that. There's no need to start with following the breath. So obviously we're going to breathe and will be aware of the breathing to one extent or another. But if you're able to just settle in and be aware of the whole body sensation, then you can just do that and just breathe and just be aware of the body. You may keep your eyes opened or closed. And some of us may sit with eyes closed habitually or eyes open habitually. And also just an interesting side note that I've been noticing that the different schools have very different approaches to this. There's a basic idea of keeping the eyes 2/3 closed and 1/3 open. I've heard a prominent Rinzai teacher say that no, you keep the eyes completely open, normal seeing, but just direct the gaze downward. I sit with one of the Korean schools, and they almost close their eyes completely, but just keep them open a little drop so they can get some light in there and not wander off into the interior. And then quite a few of us also sit with eyes closed, which is kind of the pre-Zen traditional Buddhist way of meditating. So you can keep the eyes open or eyes closed for this just sitting technique. It's fine if you can maintain your eyes open without becoming scattered or distracted by the environment. But please do not gaze at or focus on any particular objects. Your eyes are open, but your mind is still fully aware of just sitting. So if you find that you're distracted by objects and you start looking at them or thinking about them, you might be better off with your eyes more closed. Or you can follow the Soto way and look at a wall. It takes your objects away without closing the eyes. And then he says something which is interesting. I don't know if Dogen would agree with it or not, but it's the basic approach to just sitting. There is only one endeavor in this practice, and that is for you to experience that you are sitting right there. So this particular statement is about awareness of full body presence, that you're physically here. So I want to say a little drop more about that, and then we'll sit. So you may notice that the main point of Shengen's approach is not to just sit, which we could sometimes take just sitting to mean, but to be aware that you are just sitting. Not only that, but to be aware that you are sitting right there, or from your point of view, right here. Exactly where you are and not somewhere else. I would put it that way. So that's very intriguing. So let's just sit for 10 minutes with the idea in mind of just sitting. See if you can just sit and be aware that you are just sitting and see that you are here. We may take that for granted, but maybe we're not so sure about that. You know, we tend to go away. Our minds are such that they tend to fly away. So just sitting is an invitation to stay put. If you want to focus on breathing, that's fine, but utilize Shengen's instruction and make the breathing part of your just being present, just sitting. After that, I'll talk a little more about this, and we'll try to break down some of the approaches to shikantaza, just sitting, from a couple of different angles. So we'll sit for about 10 minutes, and then I'll gong us back in. My cat is meowing soon. but this is my announcement of the gong. Well, I should have gonged louder. I have to work on that. Before I talk a little more about this, why don't we have a quick round of anybody who would like to share what that was like for them, if you focused on just sitting or a full body awareness or anything else. If everybody is perfectly happy in their silent illumination, I'll go on to talk a little bit more. We'll have a chance to share more later. So although Dogen gets credit for creating shikantaza a lot of the time, and he certainly was the big developer of it in Japan, it really comes out of the Chinese Chan silent illumination teachings. And Dogen got the basic idea of just sitting from his teacher, Ru Jing, who we've mentioned. I remember hearing I can't find it, but it might still be in the transmission of the light, but Ru Jing's Chinese version supposedly translated to a slightly different phraseology, like sitting only or something like that in Chinese. But, and I thought that, although those sound similar, that there were potentially interesting nuances which could apply to what just sitting really means. Just sitting sort of implies a no frills sitting experience where you're just sitting, not doing anything else. And sitting only is a little bit more of an admonishment to make sure that you're sitting, period, that you're not doing any other activities or having any other goals or intentions. So similar, but maybe a slightly different emphasis. The Chinese word, which I promised to reveal, that Ru Jing used was mozhao, M-O-Z-H-A-O in the transliteration. And what's really interesting about that to me, Japanese mokusho. What's really interesting to me about that is that I looked it up, in the modern old Google Translate, my replacement for the non-existent giant Chinese English dictionary. And the translation of mozhao is silence. And yet the Buddhist encyclopedia says that that was Ru Jing's term for just sitting. So that's pretty interesting. So if you put those together, you could say that Ru Jing was saying sit silently, or sit in silent illumination, if you want to add the silent illumination aspect. And I think that sitting in silent illumination only, just sitting in silent illumination, is probably what just sitting really is. It's just sitting in the presence of being present, with emphasis on that presence and not with all the various items of awareness that might pop up and lead one to focus on this or that. So it's a coming away from the this or that, what you could call the frills of experience, the little items of experience, and going back to the core of experience, which is the presence of experiencing itself, the awareness of experiencing, of being an experiencer and being present as such. And that the silent illumination, of course, comes out of the Caodong school, which then became Dogen's Soto school. So I'm going to say a few more things about that to just hint at just sitting. I also personally really like the idea that Dogen got shikantaza from Ru Jing, his teacher in the Caodong lineage, and that it's part of the lineage of silent illumination. This idea that shikantaza came out of nowhere and that Dogen made everything up by himself, even though he was a great philosopher and a super enlightened teacher, and a wonderful poet and metaphorician, to coin a phrase, a word. I like the lineage connection and the fact that it was a development of what he got from his teacher, who he was very devoted to, Rujing. And Dogen added a lot of imagery and metaphor to it. But the idea of sitting as a Buddha, as opposed to sitting to achieve Buddhahood, but to express inherent Buddhahood, is a great sort of spiritual expression of the moment already being complete and of the mind already being inherently enlightened. But sometimes it can give us an aspiration that is beyond where we feel ourselves, or where we feel we are, or the feeling of the moment, and think that we're supposed to be a lot more than we are. We're supposed to be a Buddha, whatever that is, something really great. And I think the important thing about that approach to just sitting is that we have to realize that it's myself that's sitting as a Buddha, not me sitting as the Buddha. It's not that I'm trying to be Shakyamuni, but I'm trying to be, not trying to be, but realizing that I am the Buddha Robert. And that may not roll off the tongue to say about ourselves. It may be a little astonishing to try to look at it that way. I'm not quite ready to be Buddha Robert. It's hard enough to be regular old Robert. But is there a difference between Buddha Robert and just plain old Robert? Maybe if we just sit as ourselves, as we are, we'll find that out. Because it's one's own self that is just sitting as one's own true self. Anyway, all that tends to get us into a little bit of conceptualization if we try to grasp it. The simple version of just sitting is that we can realize our Buddha nature by realizing our presence right now and sitting as that presence. And there are a number of ways to approach that. If we just sit, we may miss that point, which is to sit as an act of unification, a unified and undivided mind. And to get to that, there are a number of approaches we can take. And if we're practical and persistent, we can really approach just sitting in its full unifying presence in a very concrete way. So I'd like to take another look at Shengyen's statement and just look at a couple of the elements of them and fool around with them, and then get your response to what those are like or what it's like to do them. So the first thing I'd like to focus on is whole body sensation. And by the way, if any of you have, we've all been sitting a long time, or a lot of us have. If you've mastered any of these things, or you already feel like it's second nature, don't be afraid to share that and talk about, what that's like as something that is part of your normal practice, because we can all benefit from that. But the statement from Shengyen is, if you're coming from breath awareness, as your mind settles, you can effortlessly shift from following the breath to being aware of just sitting there. So let's try two things. First, let's just take, and these will be like 1-minute experiments. Let's try 30-second experiments for now. We'll take 30 minutes of being aware of just sitting here, and see what that 30 seconds is like, if that is really your practice. You're just going to be aware with your mind that you are just sitting here, that you are here. So we'll take 30 seconds and then I'll ask you what that's like. Okay. My chance to do a more audible gong. Um, what is it like to just focus on the fact that you're just being aware of just sitting here, of just being present right here? What was that like?
Well, one aspect for me was that pain is a little different. The experience of pain in the body. You have arthritis, and it changes it somehow. It changes your perception or your feeling of pain, or it does for me.
Oh, that's really interesting and really
Yeah. Yeah, when you're not thinking, oh damn, it's my freaking knee, my freaking, and sometimes your thoughts, when you're caught up in thoughts, the pain is probably subjectively worse than it actually might be. And pain itself changes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got a pain in my knee. It's not the exact same pain from moment to moment.
That's really fascinating. And it goes along really nicely with Buddha's teaching on the two arrows, where he makes the very ancient claim that pain, the experience of pain, is magnified by the mental addition of suffering, that we extrapolate the pain into a whole thought process, which magnifies and makes it worse.
Yeah.
That's great. And it's one of the steps in shikantaza that we might look at another time, is actually taking a sensation of pain and integrating it into that whole experience. So you did that naturally through that exercise. And the next experiment is similar to this one. It's also taken from Shengyan's talk, but this is just to become aware, and I'm quoting Shengyan almost, except I'm changing becoming into become. Become aware of the whole body sitting there. And I would add something to that as a means of doing that, is to take your awareness with eyes open or closed as you prefer, and just draw an outline around the circumference of your body, from left to right or right to left. I start from the top of my head and go all the way around and then back to the head. And just draw an outline, and you'll feel the circumference going all the way around as you follow it with your awareness. And then you can look at the front and back too, and just sort of become aware of your body as a whole kind of clump. Like a clump of, it doesn't have to be a clump of mud, it can be a clump of awareness. But focus on the body as a whole and see if you can hold the whole body sensation, the whole body image in your mind. We'll do that for 30 seconds. Well, I got carried away by that one, and kept it going an extra 30 seconds. But did anyone have an experience of that sense of the whole body that they'd like to share, or the whole cat, as the case may be?
Hey, Robert. For me, on when the awareness was kind of shifted from sight to sensation, it kind of erases the boundaries of the body. They're so much less defined that it's more of the sensations are not don't feel confined to the physical body in a way. But that's what the experience.
Very cool. It kind of raises the question for me as to whether we actually feel the physical body per se with our sensations. Or maybe we're just feeling a group of sensations. I don't know if you all have time. I would like to go a little longer, if that's okay with everybody, and do at least one more experiment. This experiment is related to, it may be redundant of what you were doing when you were sitting originally, but it may not. So I just like to try, I like these little technical things because they have a tendency to click things into place a little bit more. And so what I'd like to try this time is switching back and forth between focusing on the breathing and focusing on the body. Not that they're two separate things, but you can focus on the hara and breathing in the belly, and that's a pretty specific breathing attention. Or focusing on the whole body and just being present as a physical body, and then see if you can equalize, do both at once and equalize your attention to your breathing and your attention to the whole body, so that you're not emphasizing one or the other. Neither one of them sticks out. That's actually a pretty hard exercise, but it's a really good shikantaza exercise, which has to do with having all your experience being like a continuous, unified experience, rather than having specific objects jump out. So we'll just practice trying to look at the breath, look at the body, then see if we can have both of them at the same time without overemphasizing one or the other. And we are back. So I really like that one. I'm not sure if it's literally possible to totally do it, but I really like working with that. It put me into a open type of space. in the body and with the body.
Yeah, I think for me that really brought me right into presence in a way that, you know, concentrating on one thing or the other maybe doesn't. It's just, you know, just being there. And I was like Brad today. I had a really chaotic day, and on those days I find it, you know, it's so easy to get sucked down the rabbit hole and into all of the nonsense of everyday living, and to just try to keep yourself in that place of pure experiencing can be very difficult. And you know, keep bringing yourself back. I do use the breath during the day as a way of bringing myself back to the moment, you know, when I can remember it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not always easy, but
the breath is there, you know.
the breath is all, I mean, if it's not there, you're in big doo-doo. So, you know, it's the one constant that I can always hold on to. And you know, but I think too, it is so interesting, as you know, I've practiced longer, to just be in that space where the everyday is the, you know, the ultimate as well. And to just be in you know, you're never not part of the big picture. You know,
Yeah.
it's always there, even if we don't feel it. I mean, for me, it's a felt thing. When
Yeah.
I get, you know, it's a feeling when I know I'm not just sucked into the everyday thing. You know, I can feel it when I'm part of the bigger picture. And like Max said, you know, that the edges get softer, and I feel more permeable or something. You know, there's just I don't know. It brought to mind, I just think your exercise this week has really helped bring Andy's talk last week about emptiness and signlessness and aimlessness into focus in a way. And it reminded me of a little quote that this is from a woman who she's not a Buddhist teacher or anything, but it's a very Buddhist little saying, and it's about embracing uncertainty. And she says, I relax my consciousness, I unset my heart, I wear the world as a loose garment, I learn to dance with grace on the constantly shifting carpet. And I try to keep that in mind, you know, because there's just an openness that comes with that, being able to relax. And I think part of what you know, for me, what's come home tonight is, and I think Ginger said it, it's such a relief to not to think that there isn't anything besides this. I don't have to be more than I am. It's enough. It's enough. So thank you for this wonderful little lesson tonight. I so appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And you're welcome. That's great. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, and that feeling of settling into the moment and being enough really is a relief. Our minds tend to be discontented and somehow want to do something different than the way things are. And that's our basic dukkha and our basic conundrum that we are very happy when we release in our practice. Yeah,
I think I run into the yardstick all the time. And I'm like, I'm sure my awakening isn't good enough or deep enough or big enough or, you know, I mean, oh my goodness, give it up.
You're in good company. Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, there's and that was beautifully put, by the way, Lynn. And it just made me think of sitting and how for me, one thing it's done is just makes you realize, or makes me realize, that every moment is an opportunity. And so you can have a 30-minute shikantaza and 28 minutes of it is more shit kantaza. But then in that last 2 minutes, you just drop right in, and you're there, and that's all you need. And it's just sitting is just it's life. You can have an entire day to where you feel like it's chaotic, and you're not there, but you can drop in at any moment. And something about realizing that that's the case, even when you're in the chaos, there's like a deeper understanding that it's a temporary situation, and dropping into that peace can happen at any time. Is a nice feeling to have. So anyway,
Very nice. That also makes me think of a Zen koan, which I don't think it's in the main collections, and I can't remember which Zen master it was. But one of the students asked the master, says, "Well, it's easy to practice Zen, you know, on the good days, but what about when everything is going wrong and everything is terrible?" And the master said, "That's it too." And I think that might be one of the hardest things to realize, is that everything that happens is it too, and that we can be present no matter what's happening. But dropping into that peaceful moment and feeling okay is a great fruit of practice, and not to be dismissed. We're prominently featuring our pets today.
yeah, right.
We've got cats and dogs. They all seem very happy to be alive and very present and very doing things. My cat was here, and he was sitting behind me on the chair before when we were sitting for the longer sitting, and then he decided that he'd do sleep and kaza over there. So he's still here, but he's on the couch like this. Anyone else? Either
I
about
was just going to say the pets are just such great examples of being present.
Yeah,
They know how to do it. They've got it.
they know how to drop in and they know how to drop out. Anybody like to share anything else? I've been totally pacified by this session, so if nobody says anything, I'm liable to just sit here and just keep sitting. Well, it might be the appropriate time to end the session. And boy, I really enjoyed sitting with you all and doing the exercises. And it's such a great bunch. I really like the atmosphere of the Thursday nights where we can experiment a little bit and share a little bit more. I think Al was really onto something when he set this up. And really appreciate being with you all. It's just wonderful.
Thanks, Robert. We love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Love
Thanks,
you.
Robert.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye,
you, Robert.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.